Derek McNamara, how are you?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
So you were with us last talking about La Rochelle and Ireland, and so you've been crunching the numbers on New Zealand 42, Ireland 19. Was it that different? Was there any similarities? Is there a trend developing in Irish rugby that there's one
Irish
way?
teams losing?
Well, can we get one of these after we win? That would be good.
That's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think, look, it's hard. It's the games that they've played the last little while have all been top games. It's New Zealand in New Zealand, so it's we're gonna get one soon, I think.
Is your data predictive?
Yeah, of course.
So did you expect what you saw at the weekend, or did you think something different was going to happen?
So international sport is always harder because it's kind of much more unpredictable because you don't really have the information behind it, because when's the last time New Zealand played,
and also the team selection can vary.
But it's, I think tradition and history is probably something you go off when you think of something like this. And first All Blacks game in New Zealand in 2.5 years or something in front of crowds, so it was always going to be a difficult game, but when you break it down, like we're going to probably look at 3 items, if that's okay. So we'll look at the kind of speed onto the ball, which is something that we're kind of looking at as a metric to see if we can measure balls by the Irish team coming onto the ball.
So we put a graphic up here. So for our radio listeners and the podcast listeners, what does the graphic say?
The graphic basically, we're looking at the top line shows the speed onto the ball from Ireland, basically in the first half, and then the second half, the line. And then the bottom one shows the number of activities that are happening in this game. So you can see, like, right in the middle of the first half, we hit our peak where we're coming onto the ball. So every time the player comes onto the ball, we give them a score, and then we aggregate that score to show basically. And you can see at the end of the first half, there's a significant drop off in the speed onto the ball, and that's because there's a bit of what would you say, worry in the camp. There's probably a bit, what do we do now?
We've just conceded 28 points in the spin.
Yeah. But then if we look at New Zealand, then we have a similar graph, but for New Zealand, and you'll see that
we're just going to cycle on to the next one there.
Yeah.
No, we don't have. We don't have to. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, but so there is. Yeah. So you can see New Zealand. They basically didn't have the ball at all until Sexton got, or in the right in the middle of the first half, but when they did get the ball at the end of the first half, they were able to turn on the Jets, and that's just something I think Eoin and Ger mentioned last week about putting them under pressure and cutting out that space, and that's exactly what we need to do in the next game if we're going to stop it. So we need to continue to slow down New Zealand getting the ball, and that's trust in your defensive lines, because Sexton would be considered a really good attacking player, but he also commands the team in defence as well. So when somebody like him comes off, we need to be able to have a much better plan in place to continue doing what we were doing at the start of the first half.
Okay, so our reliance on Sexton is actually not simply an attacking reliance; it's also a defensive reliance.
Well, every player on the pitch is, but yeah, big time. Yeah, especially somebody who's so vocal. You can hear him on the pitch, talking to people, making sure everybody knows where everybody is supposed to go. So it's something that's probably not even thought about. But you got Carbery coming in, who's somebody who's probably not nearly as vocal in his approach, and probably takes him a little bit of time. He wasn't expecting to come on that early, and there he is in front of New Zealand, in front of his home crowd. I think and it was a difficult game, really, really difficult game, because losing your best player basically. Like we were 5-7 up, and then you find yourself 21 points down after 4 minutes. So it's but like, look, it's the first test. There are learnings, huge learnings. Like Ireland actually played really, really well, I thought. Really, really well. There were, very few mental errors. A couple of players gave away a few too many penalties. So, that's becoming a recurring thing for Irish teams. 1 or 2 players.
Specific individuals,
yeah.
Who is it?
Well, Porter would be the guy that I'd be looking at
at scrum time or outside of scrum.
All over,
okay.
Especially the breakdown.
Okay.
He could have got pinged once or twice. So it's funny when you hear people talking about the referees after the game, but it's there was no more or fewer issues in this game than there is in any other game.
Okay, that's interesting, because I think, because rugby is so chaotic, and if you remember the thing about the Razzie video was that it leaked, right? And so they're all doing these videos. We know they've been doing these videos for years because Joe Schmidt used to tell us that he was doing them at the time. And if you're not doing them, that's fine. But that, like the notion that leaked accidentally, whatever, you have to take Razzie at his word for that. And he's having a great time drinking his beers and on more videos. Yeah. But I think the point was that, like, most people would make the case that a lot of what he was saying, apart from the respect for the captain, but a lot of the legal stuff that he's saying is correct, because literally in a rugby match there are thousands and thousands of incidents where every single individual at one point can be in the wrong position, and can be illegal. So you can stop the video at any point and go, he's illegal, he's illegal, he's illegal, he's illegal, he's illegal, this is illegal. What do you do? Do you stop every single incident and the game becomes a 4.5 hour game? Or do you just make an accommodation that there's going to be an ebb and flow in this and you hope that you come out the right side of it?
Well, I think there are, like, if you were just to take this game and it's like totality, this game was the most amount of activities in the entire game that I've done. So it was by far the highest tempo of a game. So usually you'd have around 2,000 players interactions in the game, carries, passes, kicks, things like that. But in this game there was 3,000. So when you've got the coach, the refereeing staff have to be on their game, the players have to be on their game, everybody, it's really, really important. So when Rasmussen gets pissed off about something, you know, he vents like that and he makes this video, but like there is no, I don't know that game. I wasn't analysing using the way we analyse it, but we look at referee instances. So you're usually around the breakdown, they're resulting in foul play that they may have missed. But compared to any of the other games, there's no difference.
Okay,
no difference.
The 3,000 activities versus 2,000 activities. What's behind that? Is that the ball in play? Is it the styles of both teams?
Yeah. Two teams want them to play, but it's really, really hard. Like the likes of Ireland. So you could see back in October or November when Ireland played New Zealand, the jadedness of the New Zealand team. You know, like they were tired. And it's same with Ireland now this time around, where they've been playing all season long, and it's not necessarily that they've played too much. I actually think it's probably because they've had a little bit of a break for a couple of weeks and they haven't been playing. That's why they're like this. You know, they were a little bit lethargic, you would think, but when you look at the actual tempo of the game and the number of activities and the bodies putting on their line, amazing game, like really, really amazing game. It's just a pity that they drop their heads for maybe 10 minutes maximum.
Okay, so they're not actually manifesting the signs of fatigue, are they? They're not showing those signs of fatigue.
No, you can't play a game plan where you have 1,600 activities in a game and be good at it. You know, like it's just about those 10 minutes that you're playing against the team that can score from everywhere. And that's kind of like the second point that I was just about to mention about Sexton and his HIA, you know. There needs to be more done, because like if the teams are honest about this, it's not like, obviously you've got the health and the welfare of the players, but you got the health and welfare of the people that are sitting at home watching, and all these different things. We will give a tick box if we see a possible head trauma. So anytime there's somebody's head knocked back or you see somebody getting up off the ground, we'll capture it. We don't know if it'll make any difference or not, but it's something we'll be able to bring to World Rugby and say, hey, this is something we've noticed. We can actually see this player's performance drop because of these 3 instances over a season that nobody else is really looking at. But it's also the impact that those players are having. So it's like Sexton, you got the hit at 28 minutes and 35 seconds. He was down for 18 seconds. He then got up, got the ball 29 minutes. He then misses a loop pass from Keenan. The ball goes to ground. Then he gets the pass again, and he gives a bad pass to Ringrose, who spills the ball, that results in a try 80 metres the opposite direction. So after he gets hit, he makes 3 or 4 small errors, and then I think it was Heffernan as well. He got a knock. They came on, assessed him on the pitch, led him to play on, and then he knocks the ball on like 30 seconds later, and then they take him off. So this whole idea of player welfare, you gotta be honest with it. You can't just, we're down to 35 players in the squad, we'll just leave them on.
I don't think it's that they're leaving them on because they're down to 35 players. I think it's that they're not quite sure of the impact. I think it's not from a position of dishonesty. I would argue that it's actually like it's a learning situation that they're going through, and that's why stuff like this information is really interesting. That like if you have had any kind of significant injury, and I would say it's not just a head injury, that like if you've had some kind of judder or shudder, or you've banged your shoulder and you stay on to try and gut it out for the team, more than likely you're going to cost your team, and it's actually going to end up being the players who identify.
But that you can't drive that. You can't drive that from a player perspective. You have to drive that from a
100%
youth development all the way up.
True, and I get that. And I look, that's we could actually do an hour-long thing about what the share of the pie is. The culture of the self-identifying player going, actually, I am lesser now than I should be, and so if somebody runs past me,
it's definitely better though.
I'm not going to 100%.
Yeah.
But equally, like maybe the argument in the first Maori game was that they didn't see the Jeremy Lukman incident until half time, and then they saw it and they were like, oh, we didn't see that, and because we didn't see it. So yeah, as you said, there's 3,000 different activities going on. I don't know what the correct answer is. Maybe some kind of AI with like 40 cameras, one on each player, and every time there's a vibration that goes off to one of the coaches and goes, okay, I need to check that video on 15. Okay, he's got to go, whatever that is. So I think it's really interesting. We actually just have a minute-long video here. This is my cat. So Johnny Sexton's passed his HIAs. Here's that news that broke overnight.
Actually, Johnny's fit. Johnny's passed every test that he needs to pass. So from my point of view, he's good to go.
Sure. He seemed to be training.
He's good to go. He's good to go for Saturday.
How much of a relief is that for the team?
I think he's a massive cog in there, but I think Joey came on and did well. We got back up, and again, this is what touring's all about: is our ability to adapt to what gets thrown at us, and I think we've done that pretty well. So let's hope it continues.
You mentioned touring. You've played a lot against New Zealand. Been to New Zealand a number of times. What's the biggest eye-opener or biggest challenge for some of these younger guys that have been here for now a couple of weeks?
Well, they haven't toured before. a lot of them haven't toured, so it is very different. They're away from home. It's just relentless, especially with the midweek games as well. Backing up, becoming tough, becoming resilient. And I think being able to pick yourself up every single training session is important, because you don't have time. We don't have time to feel sorry for ourselves or muck about. So from our point of view, it's being on it every single time, and that's being about professional.
Right, that's my cat making the news public overnight that Johnny Sexton will be available for selection this weekend, and you've pinpointed the difference having Sexton and not having Sexton makes to the defensive structure of the team. So that would actually make you relatively confident this game will be closer next weekend, or certainly Ireland have a chance of making it closer next weekend?
If I'm totally honest, as soon as I heard that, I actually felt a bit sad, like, for John Sexton. Like, I understand he still wants to play and he wants to play every single game, but should he be? There's a big difference between him wanting to play and should he play. But like, anyway, if he's playing, he obviously it gives us a better chance. But if you look back through the games that he's played over the last 6 months, he had a good stint there for a little while, where he played a number of games in a row. But before that, can you honestly see where he played 3 games where he got injured?
I mean, this is the big question about whether or not we should be actually just picking Carbery at the weekend.
Doesn't make any sense.
And especially for the World Cup coming up. The trouble is, right, I don't remember a long period of time where Joey Carbery has played a bunch of games in a row.
Played really well.
Either. But how many games has he played where, he also has had injury issues?
Yeah.
We need 4 out halves as opposed to having 1 and a bit out halves, which is what we have at the moment. So let's assume Sexton starts, right? Because that is what's going to happen. What should we be looking out for in the next game from the rest of the team as well?
Yeah, there's some really interesting things in the game. One is actually just around the breakdown, kind of close to the breakdown. Ireland had a lot of success, early on, running onto the ball, pick and driving, going off first receiver rather than out the back, and that was really. They made a lot of good ground, very close to the breakdown.
Who's making those carries? Is that Van der Fleer, Henshaw, that kind of?
Yeah. There was a good few. Like quite a lot. Even number 6 are
Peter Manny.
Peter Manny, yeah, as well. But One thing that I noticed, there was the New Zealand players were kind of completing tackles, so tackling players without the ball. So as soon as you make the pass, the New Zealand players would commit to the tackle and make the tackle, even though, so there was like 17 of these tackles. Like Ireland, we had 7 of the same instances, but it's just something to be aware of, because that can be a negative and a positive thing. You know, if you're able to then get those players to bite, it means that there's gaps either side of them.
Okay, yeah.
So it's just something to be aware of, that if you see that reoccurring where the New Zealand players are making those tackles after the pass, they're usually, I didn't check, but I think most of them are from forwards. So I'd be looking at that as a way to just as something to keep an eye on. I'd actually really like to see Doris come in or Conan come in for Doris. Doris hasn't really seen the heights that he's seen a couple of years ago, and I'd like to see him come in. And then also just the other thing about, like, New Zealand's goal line defence was immense, like absolutely amazing. You know, 4 times holding the ball up over the try line, or call try attempt. You know, you may not see one of them in 3 weeks of rugby. So if Ireland can get themselves into the same situations, if they can cut the speed down, cut the defensive lines down, trying to implement a game plan similar to what they did in 2018 when they beat them, where they much more speed up and stop, you know, rather than slow up from a defensive perspective. So you're kind of cutting out the space rather than, you know, protecting the individuals.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'd be trying to. That's what I'm going to be keeping an eye out.
Okay, so none of that seems like it's undoable. So I guess we had a debate yesterday, myself and Eoin, about glass half full, glass half empty. Eoin's is half full, mine's half empty.
I heard.
Yeah, I just and it did feel like it felt like there were some fundamental issues, but maybe there aren't. Maybe this is you know, it's basics that if you cut down on, all of a sudden, it's a bit like the Kilkenny hurlers, you know, you just up the work rate to a point where the opposition can't live with you. And after that, the game looks relatively easy, but it's actually not. The hard part is getting the work rate to the level where you're enforcing your game on the opposition.
Exactly. But the problem is you're playing against 15 guys that are made of stone. So when they're running into you over a certain period of time, that becomes harder to do when you've got significant injuries in your squad and your depth isn't as big. So putting the bodies on the line as much this week, it may not be possible. So they may have to try and implement a different game plan. I would imagine they might try and actually slow the game down. So you'll see them, potentially see them slowing especially at the breakdown. So in this game, for instance, you had both teams, as soon as the ball went out for line out, for instance, they were set, the ball was in as quickly as possible. So the ball was in play for a lot longer. I don't actually have that information here, but this time round, I'd prefer to see Ireland play a little bit like they did against Australia back in 2018, where, you know, they had like 700 activities in the game, so
right.
Half of the amount of work rate that they had, but they were able to, you know, you could hear the commentators in that game giving out about it. But that's how you can play a different game plan. And, you know, Ireland were top of their game 2018. They were able to play that really high tempo game, and then when they wanted to, they were able to slow things down and frustrate teams and keep possession or territory rather than possession.
Okay. Owen, you wanted to come in here?
Derek, I was just going to ask, is it possible to sort of mix and match that sort of slow versus fast game plan from game to game? Like, can they go into a World Cup and say, if it is South Africa, if it is France, we can have a game plan A or a game plan B? Or does the information suggest that actually they need to pick their plan and stick with it and have it figured out before the World Cup actually kicks off?
No. I think really good teams can do that. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's the reason why the likes of England, I think, are going to really struggle, because you can't just bring everything. You can't just hide what you do. You know, England would be saying, "Oh, we're going to peak for the World Cup," but if they haven't learned any lessons or gotten better at certain types of game plans, then you can't implement those game plans on a whim. So Ireland, I'd be, you know, play as hard as you can, play as many players as you possibly can, and try and learn what players can play certain game plans.
And could it be a case where potentially a quicker style of play suits Leinster more than it would suit Ireland, and the predominantly Leinster-based Ireland team would actually be going between different styles of play from international rugby to provincial rugby?
Well, you got to play what the players you have first. Yeah, so understand what type of players you have, then your injuries, and then you got to think about what the weather conditions are like. So this weekend in New Zealand, it's going to be indoors, so it's going to be fast, it's going to be quick. So, you know, I would expect Ireland, they won't go for the slow game plan. What they'll try and do is they'll try and implement a game plan like they did against New Zealand in October or November here, and they'll play really, really wide, really, really quickly. And if they can do that and they can keep in New Zealand's half and cut their space down and be aggressive and do all those things and not make mistakes, not give away penalties, simple things, then yeah, they got a chance. But I don't know, you're still playing against a New Zealand team that are incredibly excited to be playing at home again.
Yeah, and in front of an audience for the first time in a couple of years, and also with a bit of revenge in their nostrils, and selection for the World Cup and a coaching ticket under pressure. So, you know, it's all kind of it was perfectly delicately poised until they hammered us last weekend.
Yes. The line out we need to sort out as well. That's the one thing I forgot to say. Yeah, big time.
How easy is that?
Well, they're not competing at the front of the line out at all. So if you wanted to, they're just jumping on 4 and 6. So they're really, really good in that middle to back part of the line out, because they're able to scope they're able to see what Ireland are doing and then just throw the player up. But if they're not competing at 2, just go on 2 all day. That's
secure
simple.
the possession and try and work from there. And
you can still go off the top from 2. You can maul from 2. You can do everything. There's no real difference at this level between a passer passing the ball.
So obviously New Zealand know that, right? New Zealand know that they didn't last week compete at the front. This week they could do something completely different, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
This
is the double bluff that happens.
But I think that's something that's kind of we need to bring into the game more, which is reactional, situational. So you'll see the line out, the players in the line out, they'll make a call, they go to the line out and they'll fulfill that line out nearly all the time.
As opposed to being able to audible.
Going in and audible it and go, okay, look, there's nobody, there's got 2 props at the front of the line out.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's something that we need to start seeing more.
That's the type of thing that you hope evolves over the course of a tour like this, where they, at the end of the tour, they go, we didn't do that, we need to introduce this. Or ideally, this week, they're sitting at that going, okay, when that happens, when you see what you see, play the picture in front of you, as opposed to...
Yeah. I think, I think like the schools teams do this, you know, it's not that, but it's just, it's at this level, because you need everybody to be able to know what to do at the same time, to be able to put those connections
it also has
together.
To be perfect, because if there's a mistake, Sever Reese is under the posts.
And
that's the high wire act.
If you design a line out to work off that first read, second read, third read, like they do in the NFL, for instance, then you know what to do if something else happens. You know what I mean? But we're a little bit away from that, but it's changing. It's changing.
Okay. All right. So all in all, you're actually happier about Ireland's performance than, say, for example, I was yesterday.
Yeah. So being such a grouch.
There you go. Okay. Well, you know, 42 points. It's it had the bang of the World Cup off it. They're saying, like, so if we hadn't made the mistakes that we made, the game would have bbeen closer.
If my auntie had,
there you go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, but we always come. I remember the game where Keith Wood was playing and we were 14-7 up, and Ashton was the manager, and they annihilated us in the second half. It was 40 something in the teens. Like, it was a stereotypical, like, we've seen this movie before. We play really well for a little while. New Zealand, look at what we're doing, and then feast off our mistakes. But we continue to make the mistakes.
But see, the mistakes are magnified by New Zealand. Yeah.
So you've got to be perfect.
Yeah, but these guys have landed 10 days ago. They're still jet lagged. They're still, but like, this could happen again even more. You know, we could get beaten by 50 points this weekend and still play well. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily about winning in these. Like, I would much prefer to see us putting in start. Like, I don't think Sexton should start. I think Carbery should start. I think if we're not going to be able to get 80 minutes out of Sexton, then we bring him when we're getting, like I think we mentioned before about Leinster being like falling off the cliff kind of in the second half from a quality perspective.
Maybe bring Sexton off the bench.
Maybe you bring him in while that's happening to give everybody around him that sense of focus, and that's, you know, like it's like Jim Gavin. You know, he brought on his best team midway through the second half. You know, and they weren't necessarily the best players right now, but they were leaders, and they were, you know, they made the right decision. Yeah. So maybe that's the evolution of what we try and do. But
okay, so your point is the process is more important here than the outcome, because the outcome is only important at the World Cup.
Yeah. Well,
is that fair?
Yeah, like these games they mean nothing. They really don't mean anything. You know, the Six Nations means something because you can win it. We should be, I suppose, if we're thinking about this, we probably don't want to poke the bear before the World Cup next year. So, like, you know, if we're going to play them in the World Cup,
New Zealand is what you're saying.
yeah.
We're Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle
Exactly.
in the first few rounds. We're just like
toying with them.
Yeah.